right, Daniel here, back with the Cryptic Explorer guys at Dungeon Siege West. We have a new person in here. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Maher Sagrillo. I'm one of the designers on Cryptic Explorers and one of the people behind Tempest Tome Games and Tempest Tome Tapes.
What's up? What's Tempest Tome Tapes?
We just have like a small music side of our studio that puts out like dungeon synth and metal tapes, yeah.
Oh, awesome.
And we do like custom art for them and things of that nature, yeah.
All right, very cool. And remind the people.
I'm Stuart, and I wrote the lore and created the game world.
All right, and
I'm Elisha Seeley. I am one of the designers and lead the play testing for Cryptic Explorers.
all right. So we were talking a little bit earlier about how you can kind of choose two ways to play the game a little bit, whereas one is more tactical and one is more narrative focused. Can you guys talk a little bit about that? Like we talked about the encounter. That's you.
So, I am the most recent addition to the Tempest Tome team. When the game started, it had not that much lore, maybe like a paragraph that Maher wrote. It's got a couple hundred pages worth of lore now. There's going to be a novella that's packaged with the expansion set that was made possible by our amazing Kickstarter backers. And so that novella is tied in with the Knowledge of Death cards. Every time that you get a victory point, you get a little card with lore on it, and it is a way of making this more like the experience of playing an RPG, where you're building kind of a choose-your-own-adventure story. Every time you play, there's going to be, I think, 35 of these.
To pull from, yeah. They'll usually pull like 3 or 4.
Yeah, you won't. Yeah, you won't get all of these cards even if you play a bunch of times. And the encounter book is going to branch each of these off into different possible scenarios, depending on the class of your Cryptic Explorer, the stuff that's around you, things that are actually happening in the game. There's going to be game effects. So it makes it a little bit more random and not quite as tactical to have that stuff in, because if your guy suddenly gets a negative status effect because you got a victory point, then, you know, that's...
it diverts from the core of the game.
The
core of the game is this very, very balanced...
it is. So the core game is balanced.
Yeah. Check out the game mechanics.
But if you're playing with the kind of random status effects, then you're having to deal more with like things outside of your control as a player.
Yeah. So we have a game here with a lot of intersecting mechanics. We have the multiple goddesses that all play very differently, and multiple cryptonauts. So not every game is necessarily going to be balanced in the sense that you can pick any cryptonaut against any goddess on any board, but the overall game balance is supposed to be there so that if you decide to really want to play this game in a competitive and very, very competitive fashion, you can make the choices to pick cryptonauts to counter goddesses, pick goddesses to synergize with whatever board you're on, and really, really get at each other's throats, which is how me and some of our playtesters like to go about it. So
the Cryptonauts are the humans. And
Yeah.
They're in this like hellish world, and they're fighting against one of the players who's going to be the goddess who's controlling the dungeon and the stuff that's happening.
Essentially, the setting is somewhere between cyberpunk and like an archaeo-futurist sort of setting in which we have occult and ancient elements that are intruding into a futuristic world. There's a mega corporation and a think tank that's running it that are trying to break into the land of the dead and steal its secrets in order to make money. So there's a lot of moral ambiguity in the game, because you're either playing a death goddess defending her realm who is pretty anti-human and pretty far from anything that we could think of as the good guy, and then we have these people who some of them are good, some of them are bad, but most of them are in a gray area where they work for people who are evil overlords, and some of them like it and some of them don't. Some of them have been trapped into doing it, but you play out their stories every time that you play the game.
That's about right. Yep.
Talk about the aesthetics a little bit, because on my channel I approach game reviews a lot differently than other people. I always talk about game first. To me, that's like the most important thing. And when I first saw Cryptonauts, that was the thing that struck me. I had been impressed by stuff like Cave Evil and Dark Venture and Dungeon Degenerates. Really bold, stark art that is, kind of just bucks the trends of like modern fantasy games.
Yeah.
How did you guys arrive at something that looks like this?
I just came out of two of my biggest, I guess, influences. So, pretty much all of my art, visual or games or whatever
you did
is.
Some of the art design?
I did some of it. Yeah, our main illustrator is a guy named Brandon Gertz. He does mostly traditional art with charcoal, pen and ink, and like some watercolor. He's done like some metal albums, and he teaches. I think he's still teaching as an art professor in Florida. So he did most of the art for this game. We have a Russian woman by the name of Tatiana Kovotsky that did the boards. Jessica Sliven did a lot of the sort of like UI elements, frames for the sheets and stuff like that, icons.
She did the icons. Yeah, the icons.
Yeah, and then I did a lot of sort of like the final packaging, I guess you would say. I assembled all the elements into like the actual content and added sort of the final touches onto stuff, borders, tweaking contrast, changing the art here and there. So I had a big hand in the art, but I didn't actually like make the images.
If I looked at this, I would think it was all
one artist. Yeah, that was pretty much my job, is try to make it all look like it's one person, and also make it readable as a game. Because having a totally black and white game, it's really easy for it to be like a monochromatic mess where you can't really tell, what's a wall, what's a pit, what's a floor, what's a character, etc.
With Cave Evil, like I love Cave Evil, but it is a hard game to.
I love Nate's games. I think they could all benefit maybe from a graphic designer a little bit, but that's okay. They do it very like DIY on the ground, so to speak.
This looks a little more, I don't know, like almost a little more traditionally like a game than Cave Evil.
And we did a lot of that, like all the like white areas on the border walls, so they really pop out, and then the pits like really sink in. And on the final version, due to the amount of funding we got on the Kickstarter, we're actually going to have spot UV glossing.
Oh, cool.
So the white will pop out a lot, and the pits will look really sunken. So I think it'll help that even more. And like, if you can tell that even right now, that's pretty good considering we're not even in a particularly bright room. Yeah, so not too bad. So I spent a lot of time just fixing that stuff and making it pretty level and like everything look like it's in the same universe and game, but still function well as like game pieces instead of just looking nice, because you want it to be really readable and across like a table. So that's why each Cryptonaut has like a really distinct face to them, especially, so you can look across the table and be like, oh, I know that's that guy, I know that's that guy, I know that's that guy, pretty easily. Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of cardboard standees, and I know everybody these days wants plastic. Do you think that had anything to do with your original Kickstarter not funding?
I think so, yeah. It caused our goal to be so high on the first one. They're just so expensive.
It takes longer.
And I would love to do minis for this, because I'm not like a huge minis person, mind you. I know some people like just buy tons of them and paint them and etc. Like, I have some Warhammer 40k stuff, and I'm decent at painting, and I like minis. And I think it would be cool in the game. But yeah, at the end of the day, we felt like the 2D art being so distinct and striking, that was like way more important than having minis. And minis just drove the cost of not only the goal, but each game up so high I didn't think it was worth it. And we weren't even honestly sure it was going to fund even the third time around, because it's
the third time?
Third time, yeah. Because it's such a niche like look for a game, you know what I mean? Like, not a lot of people listen to black metal that maybe are on Kickstarter looking for board games to pick up, or you know what I mean. So
It seems like there used to be a lot more crossover between.
yeah, maybe more so.
and fantasy games.
I think it's coming back, honestly.
Yeah.
I think it's coming back to some degree, and I think there's a lot of stuff that sort of has come out on Kickstarter that's maybe paved more of the way for this.
Yeah.
And I actually think Cave Evil had a pretty big hand in it, just in existing and kind of making even an audience for a game that can look like this. Yeah.
Status. kind of,
Yeah, and we've actually
rail.
played this game a fair amount with Nate, the designer, because he also lives in Colorado, which was purely coincidental. We actually we didn't know about Cave Evil until the first Kickstarter basically was up, and somebody mentioned, "Oh, this looks like this game," and we're like, "Oh crap, it kind of does somewhat." We didn't know that, so. They're so distinct how they play, though. We've never had too much trouble explaining that to people or whatever. But
Kingdom Death, I think, has kind of
yeah, exactly.
That's kind of gotten the metal anime crossover.
Sure, yeah. But at least it's like softened people up, so to speak, to the idea of a game that's not like Tolkien or Farmers or, you know what I mean, like some really standard board game theme. Yeah, you're like farming or a merchant or whatever, or you're like swords and sorcery. That's like the bulk of board games. There's stuff obviously outside of that, but it's a lot of it. So I think the art style is the first thing that grabs people, and what we really wanted to make sure of is not only with the art looking really cool and it being a very evocative world, Stu helping a lot there, making the lore into something more full instead of just looking nice. We also wanted it to be a really good game, like a very, not only a good game that's fun to play, but one that's very replayable and unique, like brings something to the table that uniquely ties with the theme. So when you're pulling it off the shelf, it's not just because you want people to be wowed or interested in how unique it looks, but like also, hey, there's a very unique game here, and we should play that, and it's fun, and the art fits that game mechanically, and it all comes together into one cohesive whole. Yeah. And we've had a bunch of reviews for the game, not paid. Like Quackalopes was probably my favorite. It's on our Kickstarter page, and everybody pretty much said exactly that. I was drawn in by the art and thought that was super cool, but once I started playing it, I saw, wow, this is a really deep, unique game. I could play this 100 times and it would always be different. You know, you could play it very casually and fast and loose, or very competitively and tightly, so to speak, with something on the line or whatever. So yeah, but as far as your earlier question, because I got way off track, like the inspirations, it's mostly just inspired by old black metal album covers. I mean, that's black metal has always been probably my favorite genre of music, with synth elements especially. So.
Have you seen the writing that looks like a pile of dead wood?
No, sadly enough. Our very first logo actually was a little more in that direction, but
Okay, I can see that a little bit there.
yeah, not too bad, right?
This one's more readable.
That one's actually more readable, and people still complained like, "Oh my God, I can't read it." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, you are in the wrong genre." Yeah.
That meme that's like a pile of dead wood.
No, I mean exactly. I'm like all about that though. That's great. I'm totally into that. If I can't read your logo, that's fantastic to me. I don't mind at all.
I went to a show last night. Who played? I have no fucking idea.
Yeah, exactly. But it sounded rad, right? Like, so aesthetically, definitely the biggest influence is just old like second wave, first wave for the most part, black metal album covers with the high contrast art, corpse paint, blah blah blah. A bit of like sci-fi influence from stuff like Alien and what have you.
It is kind of a mix between sci-fi, like thematically.
Oh, for sure.
It's I would say it's kind of reminds me of old Games Workshop. Games Workshop
Yeah, kind of.
Old Games Workshop.
Very sci-fi heavy.
Like,
Yeah.
It's got that heavy sci-fi that is twisted to almost be sci-fi fantasy.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
There's still like swords
Yeah.
and armor and things like that in the game, and like monsters that are just beating you up in a kind of fantasy style, but also people are in like power armor and have rifles and what have you. Yeah. So, and then as far as mechanically, the biggest influence is probably the original XCOM games on PC. I've always been a huge fan of those, just having a ton of units that pile out of a drop ship, and you don't know where the aliens are, and as soon as you step out, there's gunfire going on, and like, yeah, and like guys are dying all around you. There's like a real sense of like mortality and loss in those games, where your units really do not feel anything close to invincible. Like they die so easily, they're super frail. So we wanted to find a way to bring that into a tabletop game without it being overcomplicated, since you have to really track everything in a tabletop game.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do. And also,
Such as?
Also keeping it just like generally an interesting, hardcore sort of experience. So I also really what's up, my friend? I also really like permadeath in games, which is sort of like a mechanic that's.
So is that in this?
It is, yes.
So a player is going to be playing a squad, right?
Yes.
And so they can keep a squad from game to game. And is there any kind
No,
of
it's totally round. I guess we would say match based. You always have a fresh map, fresh set of units, etc. It's not really like we're dabbling with the idea of having a campaign mode where you sort of like carry stuff from game to game. Right, and there's sort of like mini maps that are added onto the game now that accomplish that to some degree. But overall, it's meant to be like match based. Yeah, you've got this particular squad going on a specific operation on a specific board.
Every time you play, a player's going to
pick new guys and exactly. So there is player elimination in the sense that if you lose all your guys, you're out. But the way that we sort of so the classic thing with player elimination that people don't like, and the scenario that every designer fears including it into a game for, is somebody getting knocked out early or even like halfway through the game and they're just twiddling their thumbs for like 2 hours. So the sort of way we mitigated this in this game is the fact that you have a lot of units. Like if you have 3 guys and you lose 2 of them, you're still doing something in the game, you're still contributing a lot. And the fact of the matter is in the game, because it's such a squad-based, team-based game, if you lose, let's say, 4 or 5 units and somebody is out of the game is going to end probably in short order, you know what I mean, like 10-15 minutes tops. Yeah, there's some degree of snowballing there where like they have so many forces accumulating and you only have a few guys left. You're going to have to win the game pretty quick, which is possible. I mean, many rounds or matches of this game, many of them have ended with 2 Cryptonauts left on the board, and they barely eke out a win with 1 turn, and they would not have won the game, or vice versa. 1 more turn, and they would have definitely won, but the goddess pulled off a nice enough play that they were just not able to escape in time or rally themselves enough to actually get out, because they have to. They start in the realm, but they also have to like escape. So they have to gather enough like artifacts and knowledge of death and accomplish objectives on the map. And that's all well and good, but then they have to sort of regroup physically on the map to teleport out, sort of Power Ranger style, touching hands or whatever. So sometimes that's just not possible based on how thin they spread themselves or position themselves or how the goddess played. That's pretty much how we mitigated player elimination. But why I like player elimination, why we even bothered trying to include it at all, is I think it gives the game, and a lot of games in which it is included, a real sense of drama. Like there's real tension and drama and like something on the line. Like my guy can actually do something and I mess up or don't make the right play or whatever and he dies and it's an actual loss in the game, instead of a lot of dungeon crawlers where it's like I don't know, I lose some gold and I'm like back at town or I'm at a tavern or something or whatever. There's like nothing wrong with that, but considering the tone of the game is so bleak and it's literally about death and going into death and etc., to have your characters actually die and they leave a corpse behind and your teammates may have to like scavenge the corpse and find stuff that they need to survive and win the round, a lot more dramatic and interesting, I think, than if they were just whisked away to some sort of like respawn or whatever. So that's why we included player elimination. I thought our squad approach was a good way to mitigate its sort of like classic design problem, if you will.
What is it in a nutshell? What is the what's the lore background?
Here, that's you.
Give me the elevator pitch of wanting to these Cryptonauts, and why is there a goddess wanting to kill them?
In this world, which is set in the 22nd century, it's a lot like the world we have today. But the thing is that religious, social, and political conflicts, which those are going to continue happening, and they keep on shaping the world in ways that make it unrecognizable to us. We saw the Soviet Union fall during our lifetimes, and that's something that people living under it couldn't have imagined would happen. And in this world, all of the giant corporations that came out of the United States, companies like Apple, who are now supporting the anti-democracy action in China, this kind of stuff gets worse and worse into the 22nd century, and when America gets balkanized and breaks up into 3 different countries, those companies just split and go to Southeast Asia, where they're much bigger than the governments, and they run their own sort of pirate republic down there of corporate raiders. And the idea is that your people, all of your Cryptonauts, are people who have been recruited by people in the corporate states of Southeast Asia to go on missions and collect things that these big corporations, which are run by a think tank called Nauticus, things that they can sell, things that they can turn into weapons, things that they can use to topple governments and exploit people.
Yeah, so it seems like you're the good guys, but really there's a strong argument for you being the bad guys and the goddesses just being like, get out.
Literally, you got your like the humans are corporate raiders, like late stage capitalists. Plundering. And so is the goddess just kind of protecting her realm?
Well,
are you the invaders?
You are invaders. You definitely don't belong there. The game design makes it pretty clear that you're in a place that if you stayed there very long, you would die.
It's a hostile environment.
And so when Nauticus discovers an artifact in Kurdistan that allows them to travel to the land of the dead, they build a big facility around it up there in the mountains and kick out all the local people, set up a little military barricade, and start importing experts from all over the world to figure out what they can do with this technology. And so part of it is magic. They start bringing in occultists and archaeologists and people who will know what to do with it. They also start bringing in soldiers and scientists. And so everybody who comes in is taking part in this grander narrative of what is it that humans are going to do when they can enter into this world of power that doesn't belong to them. And so when you play a game of Cryptic Explorers, this is like one little jump mission that you're doing from our world into the land of the dead. And if you're lucky, all of your people will come back alive. And the foundation of it is that the very first mission is a total disaster.
So you're telling me about that. You were writing like a backstory.
Yeah.
Like something really bad happened the first time. Almost like I don't know, like Prometheus or Event Horizon, or
Yeah.
went to this initial meeting with this world or entity and it went terrible.
Basically, the woman who designed the Cryptonaut suits, who's a brilliant inventor and a decent person, goes in against her will as part of the first mission, and she's the only one who survives. Everyone else gets killed. She comes back, and she's not in any mental state after what she's experienced to explain what it is that went on. But there are implications that she's had contact with the deeper forces that make the entire thing work, and she has the ultimate knowledge of death that everyone wants to try to recover. And so all of the Cryptonauts that you play in this game are part of the second wave. There's only one mission in the first wave and it failed, and so you're trying to make up for that failure and to make sure you don't end up the same way that those first guys did.
Are you guys including, is there any kind of like special bonus scenario where you can play that first failed mission?
We unlocked the whole expansion in the Kickstarter, and it's all just that. It's called the Alpha Return. It has 3 distinct goddesses as well as the whole team from the Alpha Return lore, including Emily, the character he was mentioning, exactly. So it's sort of like the entire first scenario. It wasn't something we were sure we were going to be able to make because it was, all stretch goal stuff. We were not even certain we were going to fund the main game, let alone an expansion. So we're quite happy to be back in the design chair, making all that stuff. Yeah, and we're already about to start testing a lot of our drafts for that.
Some challenges because I'm sure that the Cryptonauts in that first mission they weren't as well outfitted as these guys, right?
Yeah, probably not.
They had more
Over here.
I actually
more arcade technology. technology?
I designed some of them to have game mechanics that aren't finalized yet that will actually sabotage play.
Yeah.
Because,
Like their guns break or their armor doesn't.
well, that's not something that we've put in yet because I don't want to totally screw the players. I still want to make it fun to play. Maybe we could make a hard mode, but one of the things that I tried to do thematically as I worked to design these, because I had a much more active role since I wrote these characters in designing the expansion. I have a lot of things based around if your character gets a knowledge of death, or alternative conditions where you aren't just getting knowledge of death for achieving board objectives. Each character I tried to have some relation to the knowledge of death, because that's what that first mission is about. So there's a guy who's a paleolinguist who walks around and visits the monoliths on the board, and if he visits all of them, then he gets a knowledge of death. And his abilities have to do with trying to activate the ancient technology, which is something that has consequences that can be kind of unpredictable. There's one move he has that unleashes the power. You roll a dice, and if, or a die, I guess, not a dice. You roll a die, and if the die comes up in a way that you didn't expect, you might damage your guys as easily as you might damage the monsters, but a blast of power radiates from the monolith. So I tried to make it feel like you are toying with forces that you don't fully understand, especially in that first round of guys.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thanks, guys.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, it looks like I brought some games to play, but I don't know if anybody is showing up. So it looks like I might be playing Cryptic Explorers tonight. So either tonight or tomorrow. You guys coming tomorrow too? Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again.